If you don't mind turning off your mics when you enter the room. As well, just be mindful that this session is being recorded and will be up on the safesportns.ca website after the presentation as well. So you'll have that recording for you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alana Lieberman and I am the Safe Sport Lead with Sport Nova Scotia, and you are here participating in week 3 of Safe Sport Month. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, we've had 2 presentations and we have one next week, which I'll talk about briefly at the end of this presentation, but thank you very, very much for joining us today. I'm going to introduce the presentation and our speaker and thank Lisa for joining us today bright and early from Calgary. So while it's 11 o'clock and sunny here, it is snowy and early there. So without further ado, please let me introduce Lisa Dixon-Wells and her presentation, The Hidden Culture of Bullying in Sports. Lisa Dixon-Wells has been working in school systems across Canada since 1990. After completing her Master's in Education in Educational Psychology, Lisa's focus has been on bully prevention and mental health. As founder of the Dare to Care program, her work is focused on early prevention and intervention in schools reaching over 1,200 schools and over 1 million participants. In 2017, Dare to Care expanded to work with amateur sport organizations in creating safe and inclusive environments where athletes can thrive in life, learning, and play. In 2016, Dare to Care received the Government of Alberta Inspiration Award for Leadership in Bully Prevention. Lisa was a former member of the Canadian National Swim Team and has 14 World Masters swimming titles. I stumbled on that because that's amazing, Lisa. Congratulations. Lisa, in addition to all the other things you've done, Lisa was inducted into the University of Calgary Sports Hall of Fame in 2015. So I will turn off my mic and my screen and have you focus your attention. Thank you so much, Lisa, again, for early and for participating. This is really exciting for all of us. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll probably answer them at the end. If we aren't able to get to the questions because of time, I'll make sure to connect, whether it's with me directly or and then sending it to Lisa, or Lisa's information is right there. So without further ado, I pass it over to you, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, and good morning, everybody. So yes, this is a very condensed version of what would typically be presented to coaches, board members, management, etc. And certainly, yeah, the questions at the end, I will do my best in my 1 hour time frame to cover as much as I can and to answer as many questions. A little bit of a background. I was a school counselor for many, many years in BC and in Manitoba. And I just, as much as I love doing one-on-one counseling and small group counseling, I wanted to have a bigger impact in the schools that I was working in. And that was the year, you know, the issue of bullying was finally starting to surface as a real issue, not just a rite of passage kids go through or kids will be kids. And I decided to go back to the University of Calgary, my hometown, and do a master's in educational psychology. And my focus was on comprehensive guidance. So how could I, as one person, have the biggest impact in an organization? And at that time, it was schools. And started to develop Dare to Care. So after 18 years of doing Dare to Care in schools, it was very, it was a sort of a lovely return to sports for me. I was contacted by the University of Calgary Swim Club, which at the time was the largest swim club in the country. And they asked if I would help them with their code of conduct. They just felt it was full of holes. And I said, well, could we go sort of one step further? If I'm able to get the funding, could we do a pilot project with the University of Calgary Swim Club? But in return of me finding the funding, what I wanted was to work with 100% of the club. So there were over 800 parents, 48 coaches, and about 650 swimmers from age 5 right through varsity that I worked with. And we did pre-post surveys. And I knew that the program would adapt well from the school base to sports, but I had no idea how powerful the impact would be. And from that pilot project, obviously now our focus is expanding into other amateur sports. And so thank you very much for having me, and let's get going. I just wanted to start with the scope of the problem. And while there's still a lot of data to be collected in the world of sports, I think we can pretty much generalize in terms of, certainly my experience in the last 30 years working in the area of bully prevention and working in schools and in workplaces as well, that what we're looking at is really roughly 15% of any organization. So let's focus in on sport organizations. 15% who are being targeted on a near daily basis. And there's a lot of really uncomfortable statistics out there in the world of bullying, saying that 90% of kids are bullied, 80% of coaches are bullied. There's a lot of misunderstanding around what the term bullying actually means. So, and I'll get to that a little bit later on, but based on the correct definition of bullying, meaning that there's a pattern of negative behavior, repetitive negative behavior, roughly 15% of your sport organizations are being targeted, the individuals within that organization. Roughly 6% of your organization are participating in bullying behavior, but that percentage actually is very inflated. It includes the henchmen, the puppets, the followers, the posse. These are terms kids have come up with. The followers, basically. These are the individuals, could be adults, could be kids, who join in on the bullying, but they don't really feel good about it. They just feel like to have status, to be part of a certain group, they have to go along with the bullying behavior. So take them out of the mix. They're definitely not what we would describe as true bullies. Take them out. What we're left with in any organization is roughly 2% who are what we would define as the true bullies. So a very small percentage of your sport organization. Unfortunately, they're causing 98% of the problems. Very small number, but have an incredible amount of power and influence in that organization. And then we've got the 79%. And at Dare to Care, this is really the focus group we've got when we're working with the athletes, with the parents, with the board, with the coaches, etc., management. Our goal is to shift the imbalance of power away from the 2% and into the hands of everybody else. And the 79% is basically the silent majority. They are the ones who are witnessing the bullying. These would be parents in the stands. These would be the kids in the locker room. These would be coaches who are witnessing other coaches being bullied, perhaps. Whatever way you look at it, roughly 79%. They see it, they know it's wrong, but they either feel like it's not their job to step in, or they're feeling uncomfortable to step in, and justifiably so. I mean, I would say that the major fear we all have in stepping in is retaliation, that the bullies will turn on us. For your athletes, their fear is that if they tell you, a coach, or tell management about the bullying, that they won't be listened to, and then they will become more vulnerable. Likely the bully will find out, and there will be retaliation. Athletes are fearful to tell their parents. They're afraid their parents will pull them from the sport, or that the parent will go in and make it worse for them. And one of the biggest fears of all, and I would say probably age 8, age 9 and up, is fear from the athletes that if they do speak up, they will be seen as a rat or a tattler, and then be sort of rejected from their peer group. So there's a lot of fear dictating this silence. And at Dare to Care, our goal is to get rid of that fear, provide them with support, skills, etc., to mobilize the masses. So you're probably very familiar with a couple of these statistics. Certainly the 7 out of 10 Canadian youth dropping out of sport by age 13, never to return to organized sports. Now, there's a lot of reasons for the dropout, but the number one reason that kids are saying is that it's just not fun anymore. The sport's not fun anymore. There's too much pressure. They don't feel a sense of belonging. They're not valued on their sport team. And all of that sort of just amounts to this massive dropout rate that we're seeing in Canadian sports. But what I wanted to really point out is the importance of having a very clear policy on bullying. And I'm going to talk about this later on. And I know all sports organizations, provincial sport organizations, have policies now around safe sport, or around bullying, but it's got to go a little bit further than that. So we'll talk about that later in this 1 hour session. So really the heart of everything right now is when you are in an organization where everybody's defining bullying differently, it's almost impossible to be impactful. It's almost impossible to shift that culture. So I want to go over the definition of bullying, and I won't go into great depth here, but there's really 3 factors that need to exist in order for you as an organization to determine, is this bullying behavior? First and foremost is the behavior has got to be repetitive and intentional. So the repetitive part of it, there's got to be a pattern of behavior. We certainly in schools where we have kids, 5 days of the week, we always tell kids that if somebody is being mean-spirited to not just one person, but generally just mean-spirited for a week or longer, that is no longer normal. That is into the realms of bullying behavior, repetitive pattern of behavior. In sports, in our higher levels of sports, when kids are training virtually every day and have tournaments or swim meets or whatever it may be, have competitions on the weekend, it's easy to track that repetitiveness. But for our younger age groups, when they're maybe only training once a week or twice a week, it comes down to the coaches to really being aware and making sure that there's not a pattern of behavior being developed over weeks. So the repetitiveness has got to be there, and the intentionality behind that. And the reason I want to bring up the intentional, there is a group of kids, a large group of kids, and it's rapidly growing group of kids that I'll talk about briefly a little later on as well. We call them provocative children. And they just don't understand how their behavior impacts others. It's not intentional. They just don't know that their, proximity, their lack of personal space is bothering others. They don't read social cues, so they don't understand that they're bugging someone or that they've gone too far. And these dear little hearts, provocative children, are quite attracted to individual sports. So gymnastics, diving, track and field, swimming, and I know those are team sports, but they're also very much motivated individually as well. These kids don't do well in team sports, so they tend to flock. They're active and they're very, very talented athletes, so they tend to find themselves in more of the individual sports. But I'll talk about these kids a little bit later on. Intentional when it comes to bullying. Bullies are intentional. If I was a bully at my, my hockey team, and I've moved and I'm now on a different hockey team, I am going to become a bully, or certainly attempt to become a bully on my new team, because let's face it, in this society, there's a hidden benefit to being a bully. You get what you want when you want, and you know that nobody's going to stop you. So, and it comes with power, this need for power. So I will find my status on my new team. It might take me a while because I need to figure out who I can target and who I best leave alone. So it is very intentional, and my behavior is repetitive. The other factor that needs to exist in bullying behavior is an imbalance of power. So in normal peer conflict, there's an equal balance of power. It's 2 individuals who have had a misunderstanding, have a falling out. It's usually relatively short-lived. Once they calm down, they're usually pretty good at resolving the issue and then moving on again. It's kind of a dance, a back and forth dance. I call you a name, you call me a name, back and forth, back and forth. I exclude you, you exclude me. There's equal power there. It becomes bullying when the imbalance of power is so great that the individual doing the bullying has all of the power. They're way up here. even more power because they look around and they see that people are watching, but nobody's intervening. Nobody's helping the target. And then on the flip side, the child or the adult, the coach, the parent being targeted has even less power because they look around, they see that people are watching, but nobody's coming to their assistance. So there's a real imbalance of power. And these two factors, the repetitive intentional and the imbalance of power, are incredibly important moving forward in the world of bully prevention in sports. Because, and I think most of you will agree, the word bullying has become so overused and misused in this society that parents are calling everything bullying behavior. Kids are misidentifying or mislabeling it as bullying behavior. So as an organization, you need to have a very clear and consistent definition, and your athletes need to know what that definition is. Your parents need to know, everybody within that organization needs to know what that definition is. So again, imbalance of power. Normal peer conflict is normal. It's going to be part of your day-to-day activity in a sports team, in the workplace, in schools. Conflict is normal. Bullying is not. The last sort of bullet that helps us determine whether this is bullying behavior or not is unequal levels of affect. Affect is emotion. Again, in normal peer conflict, you are going to see the two individuals have emotion. It may not be the same emotion. One's angry, one's hurt, one's frustrated. It doesn't really matter what the emotion is. At least they both have it. And for coaches, for adults, this is great when it's kids having conflict, because usually their emotion is so charged that it draws attention to the fact that something's going on, and as adults we can go and help calm them down. And like I said earlier, once they've calmed down, they're pretty good at resolving the issue. I wish it were that easy with bullying. The problem is, with bullying behavior, the individual being bullied, the target, learns at a very young age to hide that emotion. And the child or the individual doing the bullying is kind of devoid of any emotion. They don't see this as a problem. I did what I did because you made me. They kind of put their blame on everybody else. And so there's really no degree of emotion being shown. So it's very easy. It's why we call it the hidden culture of aggression in sports, because the emotion isn't there. You can't measure imbalance of power either, but you can keep track of the repetitive nature behind the behavior. So hopefully that clarifies the difference between bullying and conflict. I'll just show you one more slide. This is one we share with kids, with athletes, with the students in school. There's a big difference between a mean moment, which we all have. It's usually emotionally charged. We're upset about something. It's hurtful behavior. It could be name calling. It could be really any form of disrespectful behavior. It's on purpose because we're upset, and it's one-sided. That's a mean moment. That's normal in life. Conflict is between two people or two groups of people. It can be hurtful, but both parties are involved. Again, equal, power displayed between the two parties. And then we have the bullying, which is very one-sided. It is hurtful, it is intentional, and it is repetitive. So it's just an easier way to explain bullying to help kids understand the difference between what is normal, which is mean moments and conflict, and what is absolutely not acceptable. I'm not going to go into the types of bullying. I think we all know what all the different forms of bullying is. It goes so much further than just verbal and physical forms of bullying. I will say, if I had more time today, I would go a little more into social alienation and cyberbullying, and also sexual harassment, racial, cultural harassment, because those forms are what are really the hidden forms in sport. Social alienation is more of the relational types of bullying. So the rumors, the gossip, damaging people's status within a group, damaging their relationships within a group, excluding from a group. So all of those forms of bullying are very, very much alive and well in the world of sports, and cyberbullying as well. And this is one area that we go quite in depth with parents, their role in the world of cyberbullying, but also with the athletes as well, and how they can self-monitor or learn to self-monitor a little bit better their use of the internet, of social media, of different platforms like TikTok, etc. So I'm not going to go into that today. We simply don't have the time, but it is an important conversation to have with your organization. I guess another, just on a side note as well, in terms of cyberbullying, your organization also has to have a very serious conversation around the use of phones, and what your policy is around. Are kids allowed to have them in the locker room? Are they allowed to have them on site at their tournaments? I mean, tournaments are long, competitions are long. Can they have them on their person, or do they need to be locked away? Those are all conversations that certainly need to be had. So this is something I do want to spend a couple of minutes on, simply because it is such a rapidly growing group in our world, are provocative children. These are often very bright children, not always in the way that schools, for example, would measure academic success, but these are very intuitive children, big picture thinkers. They just see the world in a different way. We often call them old souls. And the issue is that they often irritate other individuals, annoy other individuals, teammates, for instance, but they're unaware that that's what they're doing. And you as a coach could remind them over and over to stop poking that kid, or, give them some space. You can remind them or tell them to stop talking so much. These kids do have a lot on their mind, and they like to share it a lot. So you can remind them all you want, but it's almost like it goes in one ear and out the other. These kids are very visual. They learn more from visual, like from role playing, from behavior charts, that type of thing. And I'll give you an example at the end here. They are very disliked on the team because they can be quite annoying. And I say this with love because actually I have a child. He's now an adult, 23, and he's fantastic, amazing, but he very much fit into this category in his school years. And we tried him in multiple sports. He just never quite fit in. They fight back in bullying situations. When you think of targets of bullying, you think of very passive, shy individuals who just sort of take it and never stand up for themselves. Well, provocative children do. They stand up for themselves. They will end up punching back if they need to, but they always lose because they do not have a support group that stands up with them. Again, they are not well liked on their team, within their group, within their squad. They kind of are lucky if they have one friend, and even luckier if they're able to hang on to that friend. So out of frustration and annoyance, because they often are very much targeted by the bullies on the team, they will fight back. And then who ends up getting in trouble? These kids end up getting in trouble. Not the bully, because teammates don't report the bullying, but nobody stands up for these poor little kids who just really don't fit in. So they're difficult to recognize as targets because, and quite honestly, often they're identified as bullies because they always seem to be in the heart of issues going on in the team. Their name keeps coming up over and over. So when we talk about repetitive nature of behavior, yes, they repeatedly show sometimes inappropriate behavior, but the intention is not there. They honestly do not know that that's what they're doing. These kids often are diagnosed on many levels, ADD, somewhere on the autism spectrum, as gifted, maybe nonverbal learning. They usually have some sort of diagnosis, but what they all have in common is the fact that they are lacking social skills. And it is that lack of social skills that causes all of the grief within your team. And the great thing is social skills can be taught, but that's not something that really a coach should have to take on. That is something where the parents and the school need to be very much involved in helping that child sort of learn appropriate social skills. Again, if we had a longer time, I would go a little more into detail about, what schools, what parents should be doing for these children. For you and for the sake of this presentation, I just want to identify and help you understand that these kids exist on your sports teams and probably drive you crazy. But I'm asking you to just reframe a little bit. These kids are not doing this on purpose. They need structure. They need visual cues that what they're doing is not appropriate. And again, maybe I'll jump in right now and give you an example. My daughter is a swim coach, and she had, a couple of years ago, she was working with a sort of 7 to 9-year-old group. And she had a young boy who just was in talk, delayed everybody getting in for workouts because he kind of manipulated the questions before workout. And finally, my daughter caught on that this was what he was doing. And then in the middle of workout, he would just stop in the middle of a set and ask all sorts of questions. And of course, disrupt whatever lane he was swimming in. So what she did was, understanding that he very much was a provocative individual, not really unaware of how annoying he could be, she said, listen, every workout you can have 3 non-swimming related questions, and I'm going to keep track of them on the whiteboard. And none of the other kids knew this was going on, but there was a little check mark that this boy knew that my daughter was keeping track. And so, most workouts, before they even got in the water, he'd already used up 2 out of his 3 questions. And then he'd be about to ask his 3rd question, and my daughter would just simply say, look, you've used 2 of them. Do you really want to use up your last question? And he would nope, and off he'd go. And in the middle of the set, he'd be about to ask a question. She said, do you want to use up your question? Nope. And he'd push off and finish the set. So that visual, just that simple, having the visual check marks on the board helped him self-monitor his question asking. And so I know it's a lot more complex than that, and certainly something that some of you might want to look into, sort of how to work with these kids, but just understand they exist. And as administration, as coaches, as board members, all I'm asking is that you reframe when you're working with these kids. This last bullet point says they tend to make adults feel like they deserve it. And I need to figure out a better way of saying this. But what I'm trying to say is that as adults, these kids kind of annoy us as well, and we don't have a lot of patience for them. And therefore, our behavior towards them is often quite short and dismissive. And the kids, the rest of the team, pick up on that, and they kind of go, well, that coach doesn't even like the kid. Why should I? I just want to backtrack a little bit and just say this. The 2 social skills I've seen missing in every provocative child I've ever worked with. And now they could have a whole long list of social skills that are lacking, but the 2 consistent ones, one is they don't understand personal space. They don't mind or they don't like anybody being in their personal space, touching their equipment, etc. But they're all over everybody else's, and they just don't seem to understand that that's inappropriate. The other social skill that's lacking for them is their ability to read social cues, which is critical to be able to read people's body language or tone of voice. Even as a coach, as you're getting frustrated with this child and your tone of voice is going up, they don't hear that change in that tone of voice. They miss out on those incredibly important social cues. So again, these kids exist, and it is a rapidly growing group. You know, when I work in schools, when I first started working in schools in the early 90s, I would say there were probably 2 or 3 of these kids in every school. Now there are, you know, 3 or 4 in every classroom. And I would extrapolate that into the sporting world as well. You've got a handful of these kids in your organization. So just reframe, have a little bit of patience, you know, take the time to have a little chat with them during workout. You might be the only one who's talked to them all day. So the reason I'm bringing these kids up is because, of course, they are in your organizations, but also they are often labeled as bullies, and they are not. They are not intentional. Their behavior can be repetitive, and therefore there does need to be consequences for that behavior. But please, please be very, very careful that you are not labeling these kids as bullies, and not allowing parents or other kids to label them as bullies as well. Could it be that a provocative child could also be a bully? Yeah, I guess it could be, but it would be very, very difficult for 2 reasons. One, they do not have a posse. They do not have that support group that helps them feel more powerful. And second, they have very low self-esteem. Throw away anything you've ever read that talks about bullies having low self-esteem and they bully in order to feel better about themselves. That is a complete myth. In fact, true bullies actually have a very inflated self-image. They think very highly of themselves. That's why they're able to hurt others in order to have power. Many go on to have personality disorders. If there's no intervention as a child, they go on to have some sort of personality disorder as an adult, and largely around the area of narcissism. So I think right now in our world of politics, we could probably name a whole handful of these individuals very, very quickly. So if you have any questions about provocative children, you can certainly reach out to me afterwards, or, you know, if we have time at the end of this presentation, I can address a little bit more here. So just as we need to hold our athletes accountable for their behavior, we need to hold our parents accountable as well. And I won't go through this list. I think anyone who's been in sports for more than a year has certainly had experience with 1 or 2 of these parents. The large majority of parents in sports are fantastic. They know what their job is. They're there to be a support of their child and to support the organization. But you're always going to have, you know, that small number who cause, like I said, 98% of the issues. And so we need to hold them accountable as well. I'm going to talk about the code of conduct and my suggestions around your code of conduct and policies and procedures a little bit later. But what I actually just want to share with you is a video that I started showing during parent sessions during my sports, you know, working with sport organizations. And I was not expecting the impact it had. When I would turn on the light after showing the video, you know, half the parents were in tears. So this video is a nice wake-up call for parents. I have it embedded in my PowerPoint, but I'm finding it's not working, so just bear with me. I'm going to stop share here, and hopefully, Alana, maybe you can just give me the thumbs up if you can see this and hear it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I prefer that my parents, if I play bad, don't say anything. And if I play well, it doesn't really matter if they compliment me on how I play. I just I don't know, I prefer my parents to, not talk as much. I can hear them cheering me on, and I'm thinking in my head, just shut it, I'm trying to focus.
My mom yells in Spanish.
Go, go, go.
My mom just says, use the backboard. You should use the backboard. I get angry because it annoys me. I'm kind of embarrassed.
She tells me to get in the position that my coach told me not to get in. I'm like, well, no. And then she's like, get in your position. I'm like, no.
I get a little tense when I have a certain score to get. And she's like, you gotta get that whatever score. And I'm like, ah. I don't like it when they try to push me even more, even though I'm trying really, really hard. Coming from the coach's mouth is kind of better, I feel like, because your parents are there to support you and your coach is there to help you, you know? You just start screaming, Valentina, run faster, make a basket. But I just start going slower every time when she says that.
The other people were like, wow, that mom is like really wanting her kid to win.
In my inside, you can't see it, but I'm inside saying, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Sometimes I just look into space. I try to listen to them and then do what they say so they don't start yelling again. I don't really want them to give me that much advice because then I forget it all. Sometimes I get nervous when they yell and nobody else is yelling. Sometimes it can embarrass me, like a lot. Wait. What's going on? We're just trying to do this, but you want us to try harder? Well, I am.
I'm not going into a game not trying my hardest. That'd be like messed up.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. Sometimes when we try to get the ball in basketball, you kind of think in your head that they're kind of like gonna push you and you're gonna fall and hurt yourself. They don't need to like always be like telling me what to do like every minute of the game. They kind of just gotta let me play. I love when you say like really nice. I got it, Mom.
I'd like to look back and I'd like to see you like smile or like give me a thumbs up.
Mom, I wish you would be a little bit quieter. Say like you play good and like you can get them next time. When they smile and say like good job. Mom and Dad, thank you for loving me. I love being my supporter. When I'm upset, my mom and dad cheer me up.
Sometimes I forget about all the work that they do for me.
Be my biggest fan. We need to level up. I want you to know I need big hugs. I love the snacks that you bring me. It makes me happy when you always encourage me. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Please just be my mom and dad. Yep, that's it.
All right. So let me just get back to the presentation here. So, you know, parents, like I said, the majority are very supportive of the organization and allow the coaches to do what they need to do. But again, there are some and who are causing a lot of problems. My father back in the 70s and 80s was one of the founders of Swim Alberta. And I asked him not that long ago, and mind you, he just turned 90 this summer, but I asked him not long ago, what was different back then to what you see going on now? And he said quite simply that back then, as a coach, he was allowed to own the deck, like own the pool. And very, very rare was it that a parent would come on deck and, talk to him. They would set up appointments. They would, most of the issues were around, their child was ill or couldn't travel because of a certain other commitments. Very rarely did he have a demanding parent. And I think we've sort of swung the whole other direction. We always do. Society always swings way too far one way and then eventually comes back to balance. But, I do think it's important that parents understand their role, and that organizations have the ability to manage the parents who are making life difficult for everybody else. That one parent in the stand who is making it uncomfortable for every other parent in the stands who just wants to watch their child, perform or play. Another thing that, in a parent session that I would definitely go into is talking about the characteristics of a coach that are often labeled as bullying behavior, but are not, that again, swinging too far, parents becoming too overprotective and complaining when their coach perhaps put them in an event that the parent doesn't think their child is ready, or the coach has higher expectations for their child than they do. The coach doesn't put them on a relay for various reasons. Just questioning everything that the coach is doing. And often parents will call that bullying behavior when they don't feel that their child is getting enough playtime, et cetera, et cetera. So, I do have a whole list of behaviors that are often confused as bullying behaviors that I think parents need to take a good look at. Having said that, though, there's often, as coaches, sorry, we're frozen here. Let's see if I can forward this. There we go. As coaches, we need to hold ourselves accountable as well, and hold each other accountable as well. Most of you have seen this. For the coaches who are in the audience, how much impact you have on a child's life. It's absolutely incredible, but you need to ask yourself, what kind of impact is that? Is it positive growth impact? Is it negative? Are you part of the reason that kids are dropping out of sports? And the reality is that there are some coaches whose behavior would be considered bullying behavior. Again, repetitive, intentional targeting of a child or a family. This list right here, everything about it talks about repeated. Are you going to, on occasion, is a coach going to blow their lid at the whole team or at an individual? Yes, they are. That's being human. That's not bullying behavior. But if it's repeated, yet we have a problem here. Questioning an athlete's ability, intimidating, minimizing, downplaying an athlete's injury repeatedly, etc. Again, repeated negative behavior is not to be tolerated on a sports team either. So just to sum it up before I get to the code of conduct, because I think it's an absolute critical part of bully prevention in any organization. Here's sort of the 6 ways as an organization we need to start implementing these 6 issues in order to really provide a safe and caring environment for our athletes. One, as an organization, from the coaches to the board to management, you are all modeling what should be respectful behavior. The research over and over shows, again, the relationship that a coach has with the board and management, if it's a positive relationship, you will get more from the coach and the parent and the athlete's relationship. If it is a positive relationship, you will get higher performance and more buy-in from the parents. So again, starting right from the top, being positive role models. Encourage your athletes to report bullying behavior. Well, first, before they do that, they need to know what bullying is versus conflict. So having sessions around bullying, what is bullying behavior, what is not, the different types of bullying, what is acceptable on your team. Those are conversations that need to be had. And we know in the world of bully prevention, the first 6 weeks, a startup of a season, is when the new bully target dynamics are developed. Now, certainly old dynamics from the previous year are going to continue, but with kids getting older, perhaps new coaches coming in, new athletes coming into the program, the dynamics can change, and it's that window, the first 6 weeks, if you're starting up in the fall, sometime in September, let's say before Thanksgiving, there's got to be a concerted effort in teaching and reminding kids about the rules of respected behavior on that team. If you are starting a springtime league, you know, again, the first couple of weeks, you've got to take that time to set the tone for the season. Require every parent and athlete to sign a code of conduct. I think that is happening in most sport organizations, but I do want to come back to that and take that a little bit deeper in a few minutes. Document, document, document. Now, in a perfect world, we would be documenting every little upheaval in our organization, but that's just not possible. What I'm saying is, when an organization, for instance, a coach, starts to recognize a pattern of negative behavior amongst one of their teammates or a parent or a fellow coach, they need to start documenting. And that word document seems to scare people because we think of it as in legal terms. It's just very simply writing down, okay, what happened, who was involved, and when did it happen? And then just building on that documentation so we can go to the board, and the board can support the coach or can support, you know, management in defining it as bullying behavior, because clearly there is a pattern of negative behavior here. That documentation is incredibly important. It can be done on phones. Coaches have their phones, I'm expecting. Parents have their phones in the stands. Just documenting on the phone if you don't want to document on a piece of paper, but that documentation, again, very, very critical. Breaking up cliques very early on. One of the biggest issues in sports in terms of bullying, the types of bullying, is the social alienation, exclusion. Rumors, gossip, exclusion, which then leads to cyberbullying. The two of them go hand in hand. And so in order to avoid that, the team building, you know, and opportunities for team building, but also opportunities for kids to work in different pods, different squads, etc., as best as you can as a coach, to be changing those up as frequently as possible. And then skill development. And this is not something I would expect a coach to do with their team, but it's certainly something at Dare to Care that we spend time, especially with the younger athletes, sort of the 12 and under, is helping them build their tool belt of skills. And it says, what can I do if I'm being bullied? Ha-ha, so is a mnemonic device. Each of those letters stands for one of the skills, non-reactive skills that we teach to help children sort of build that tool belt. But I want to say that these skills that we teach them are good for day-to-day conflict as well, not just for bullying behavior. They're life skills. I don't have time to go through these skills with you, but I just do want to say, quite, you know, to simplify it, each of these skills as adults, we tell kids to do. We say, you know, you just walk away, avoid, or go ask for help, or stand up for yourself. We tell kids to do that, but we don't really take the time to instruct kids how to properly do that. Asking for help, it's a skill. You know, how many coaches, how many parents have had a child come up to them all whiny, and as adults, as soon as we hear that whiny voice, we assume it's tattling. And I do swear there's a place in the adult brain that shuts down when we hear tattling. We just don't want to hear it. Asking for help is a skill. It requires a child to remain calm. It requires them to, we always say the first 3 words the child needs to say are, please help me. Because that place in the adult brain, when they hear a child say, please help me, opens up, ready to listen. And then calmly, the child needs to share detail. It's not enough for the child to say, Tommy's bugging me, Stephanie's bullying me. They need to give detail and when it started. So again, this skill set is incredibly, incredibly important. And this is also the skills we're teaching in schools as well. So going back to the 6 ways to prevent bullying in your organization, that code of conduct. I do want to spend a moment on this because I've seen a lot of the code of conducts out there, both in school and also in sports. And like I said earlier, it was the code of conduct was the reason the University of Calgary Swim Club reached out to me in the first place. And when I looked at the code of conduct, what I saw was a very, very wordy document that covered just about everything, and everything was lumped into this document, from, you know, wearing the right team colors on travel days, having equipment, being on time, not having alcohol on away trips. Everything was all included in this code of conduct. So what I want to say about this is, whether you call it policies and procedures or your code of conduct or your discipline policy, bullying is pervasive enough in every organization that it needs to have its own code of conduct. We know, certainly those of you who are parents, at the beginning of the year, you are inundated with forms from school. Most of these are now online, but you're inundated with things you need to sign and check off. And then sports start up and you're inundated with, you know, clothing, equipment purchases, clothing purchases, your FOIP forms, registration forms, and nobody's really reading anything. So if your code of conduct is just for your organization is just on the website and you hope that parents go to it, please note they're not reading it. If it's a piece of paper or a couple of pieces of paper amongst all this other piece of paper that the parents have to read, they are not reading it. Sure, they're signing off on it, but they're really not reading it. My thought is this, that if bullying starts to take its form within the first 6 weeks of every new season, it's within that time, and I'm going to say towards the end, like maybe 3-4 weeks into the new season, that a code of conduct specific to bullying goes out. What is expected, what will not be tolerated, and what the actual procedures are in dealing with that. One of the other flaws I see in code of conduct is often it lists the behaviors that won't be tolerated, but then there's no actionable steps. There's no follow-up. So yes, you know, please don't do that, but then nobody really knows what to do. So I want to share with you what was developed with the University of Calgary, and I'm more than happy to share the entire code of conduct that we created. But what I'm going to share with you right now, and I can share that through Ilana, maybe if people are interested, I can share the document with you, the PDF, and you can share it out. But I want to show the actual procedures, because this is where we usually fall down in our code of conduct. We don't actually have steps for the board, the coaches, the board, etc., to follow through on. So here's an example. It's 4 steps for dealing with bullying with an athlete. The first step is the primary coach, whoever the coach of that athlete is, sits down with them, reviews the code of conduct, the bullying code of conduct, not the general code of conduct. The parents and the head coach are contacted, and the incident is documented and then filed somewhere with the board. It's just filed. Our hope would be then that the kid gets it, that the club, the team is not going to tolerate bullying, and they stop. But if they don't, they blow that off and they continue. The next step, it becomes more of a formal investigation. The head coach, the primary coach, maybe a board member, and the parents and the athlete will sit down in person. Code of conduct reviewed, the incident is documented, and please note also consequences, you know, whether they miss the next tournament or they can't come to practice for a week, that's something that needs to be embedded as well, some sort of consequence. But the incident is documented, filed with the board, you hope all is good. But if it happens again, so now we're at the third incident, now it just becomes more, it's the final warning. We've done, as an organization, we've done everything we can to help you understand that this behavior won't be tolerated. If you do it again, know that this is it. Final warning. The next time this happens, you will be suspended or removed from the organization. You'll note at the bottom, it says at any step, consequences may be given and the police may be contacted depending on the severity of the incident. So obviously, if it's a sexual harassment, some sort of physical abuse, something extreme, step number 1, you jump right down to step number 4. If it's serious and police are involved, it is very possible, most likely, that the individual, the athlete, will be removed from the team. I do want to say that University of Calgary Swim Club has been utilizing this for 3 years now. They never have now at this point, because the team, the club, the organization on whole knows that this is a serious issue, that bullying will not be tolerated. They never go beyond step number 2. By step number 2, the child is, towing the line again. The same steps occur for the parents. It's really very much the same. Document, document, document. Final warning is given, and if the parent doesn't heed to that advice, the 4th time around, they are removed from that, and possibly their child is removed from that organization as well. And then you'll see we also have it in place for coaches. So everybody within the organization is being held accountable for their behavior. Document, final warnings, etc. This will help you tremendously if you have this paved out. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but if you have a code of conduct and the policies, the procedures that will be taken place if someone is displaying bullying behavior, it will support you in following through. It will support the coaches in following through. If you don't have this, I will tell you right now, the bullies of your organization will find the loopholes, they will win, and they will continue to wreak havoc. And what will happen is you will start losing members. You will start losing your athletes, your parents. They will be finding different teams, different clubs. So at some point as an organization, we need to stop tiptoeing around the 2% who are causing all the trouble, and we need to start reclaiming our communities. And through a really clear and concise code of conduct and these steps, that's exactly what's going to happen. You will reclaim. You may lose an athlete or two going through this process, and yes, you might even lose your top athlete, but the message you're sending to the rest of the team is so incredibly powerful that in return, what you're going to get is all sorts of top athletes wanting to be part of your organization where they feel safe and included and welcomed. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. This was just a Burger King video. I don't think I'll share right now. So having said that, I think I'm just going to stop share and see if there are any questions. What time is it? It's 8:57. I tried.
No, this is perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. I think certainly for me, I recognize that your presentation is a much condensed version of what you would normally give in a workshop. I know that my interest is even more piqued now, and I think there'll be lots of discussions going on. In the meantime, and feel free to reach out to me if you want to connect with Lisa or Lisa, I hope it's okay if they connect with you themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
I can certainly facilitate any discussions going forward. Are there any, I don't see any questions right now other than there was a question for sharing that link. You were right that I had tears. You were right about the video, so thank you for sharing that. And I think we'll probably be seeing that pop up here and there in the future. I'll put it out to the group. If there's any questions, feel free to ask them here or again directly to me, and I connect you with Lisa or connect with Lisa yourself. I don't see any questions coming in, so I want to thank you so much for your time on this really important subject. I certainly learned a lot. I think going forward, it will provide some interesting discussions and topics for discussion. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being with us today. And thank you all for participating in week 3 of Safe Sport Month. We have one more presentation next week with our Director of Sport, Mark Smith, who will be hosting a panel on diversity and inclusion. And that, just keep in mind, that presentation is at 12:30. So that's a little bit later, and it will be for an hour. So thank you so much again for this eye-opening and amazing presentation. I wish you all a safe and happy and healthy day. And again, keep in mind that this is recorded and will be up for you to share later and to look at as well.
Thank you.